All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I am Andy Mack. Let's talk about a developing, pressing story as a search is underway in Wisconsin for a woman from the Slender Man stabbings that happened more than a decade ago, as police in Madison, Wisconsin say they are looking for Morgan Geyser. As you can see this post from our Fox 16, Sam Kramer say the Madison Police Department says Morgan Geyser, who was involved in the Slender Man stabbing case back in 2014, 2017, cut off her GPS tracking bracelet and is now missing. And of course, officers are searching for a woman there after the Department of Corrections monitoring bracelet left a group home on Saturday night. So they are saying she was last seen around 8 p.m. with an adult acquaintance. Her whereabouts are unknown as of Sunday morning. And this story obviously gripped the nation back in 2014 as Geyser and her friend Anissa Weier were both 12 at the time of the crime, lured a classmate to a park in Waukesha, Wisconsin in 2014, where they stabbed her 19 times to impress Slender Man, a boogeyman for the internet age. At age 15, Geyser pleaded guilty to a charge of attempted murder in a deal with prosecutors to be placed in a mental institution instead of serving jail time. So a lot to get into with this. Let's bring into the conversation right now forensic psychologist Dr. John Delatorre. We appreciate your time here on Live Now from Fox and just talking about the mental state of this woman they're searching for. Is the public, should they be concerned?
I don't know if they should be concerned, but they should definitely be pressing to find her, because here's the real issue. And I understand that there were some concerns about maybe she was fabricating some symptoms, but if she was placed on medications and even half of her symptoms were as severe as they used to be, if she's not on these medications and she's not being treated, then the possibility of her disorganization, her thought process becoming more disorganized, the possibility gets higher that she becomes either a victim of a crime or potentially perpetrates another crime, because we already know she's capable of doing that.
And we talk about this. You mentioned the urgency of this search. When you're talking about people at this mental institution and the risk assessment of them, they're aware of this. And can you discuss the levels?
Yeah, so when you're really thinking about the constant monitoring, right? No, it's not prison, but it isn't exactly easy street either. Therapists and other mental health providers are constantly checking in with each of these patients, each of these residents, asking them if they're having thoughts of harming themselves, harming other people, are they compliant with medications, right? All of these different kinds of things. What are their anxiety levels? And the more yeses you give to some problem areas, the more likely you are to have constant supervision. The more likely you say no to some of these, right, then you can start reducing and giving the person more freedom to make sure that they can incorporate treatment concepts while also maintaining their own safety, which is key. Without any of these safeguards, then we don't really know how she's going to act. We don't really know how she's going to behave. We don't really know what decisions she's going to be making.
Yeah, that is a very good point. I want to point back to something that happened earlier this year as a Wisconsin judge denied potentially the revoking of her release, or a conditional release stemming from potentially mental health treatment, GPS tracking, home placement. When we're talking about some of these conditional releases, can you just get into and describe how those work? What type of conditions are typical?
So conditions are really dependent on the kind of crime that a person committed, any other mitigating factors. So like, let's say substance abuse or mental health treatment in our particular case with Morgan. So all of these different things, a judge can say, well, listen, you're going to have court order treatment. That generally means that you're mandated to take medication, or you're mandated to have monitoring, an ankle monitor 24 hours a day. People need to know where you are. So the more of these kinds of community supervision factors that you have, the more likely they are that the judge is trying to say, we need to keep an eye on you. There are some people who have very little monitoring, but individuals who need mental health treatment often have a little bit more, because the safety not only of the community, but of themselves is at stake.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, because obviously in a group home, she pled guilty to this to avoid serving jail time. Who else is in this home? Who is she surrounded by?
Sometimes it's other people who have been found not guilty by reason of insanity, but it's often individuals who may have been civilly committed from before. So they had active psychotic symptoms or they were a danger to themselves or others. And it's a step down residential group home. So they're being reintegrated into society so that they can people can monitor how their medications are holding, but also give them a safe space to learn how to use computers or get a job, right? Do the things that most people know how to do kind of on their own, but you couldn't do because you had these mental health impairments interacting with your ability for your daily life.
And we talk about this hearing that was supposed to take place potentially around that conditional release, saying they should stop that. In terms of how the court views this, in terms of how they figure into how this person changed, the rehab process in which they're going through, how does the court determine that?
It's complex. I mean, the judge has to take a look at what the crime was. The judge has to take a look at what treatments have been made available. The judge needs to take a look at whether the person has been compliant. And all of these things, the judge is trying to keep society safe. The judge is trying to make sure the recidivism doesn't happen. And when you have things like people cutting off their ankle monitors or people not being not compliant on treatment, the next person in line to request, the judge may be a little bit hesitant to offer these kinds of things again.
And you mentioned it, you said it a couple times because we're talking about this pleading to a first-degree attempted murder of a classmate that was also 12 years old. When we're talking about that severe of a crime, what levels is the judge looking at? Because this is about potentially as high as it goes, correct?
As potentially as high as it goes, but I think the mitigating factor I think a lot of judges would take a look at is the age at which the individual had committed this crime. Now, had she done it when she was 25 years old, I think that's different than when a 12-year-old does it. But does that mean a 12-year-old gets to get away with it, or a 15-year-old or a 17-year-old gets to get away with it scot-free? No, of course not. But that doesn't mean that someone who is clearly an adolescent and clearly still not developed as an adult, that doesn't mean that their entire life should be kind of shuttered because of that.
Yeah, can we get into that aspect? Because she was 12 years old, along with a classmate, luring a classmate, a 12-year classmate, into a park in Waukesha, Wisconsin. How much is that, the 12-year-old, the brain obviously not fully formed in that age group? What do they look at in there, and how much is still left unknown outside in the kind of study of this?
And honestly, that's a niche practice, right? So I practice as a forensic psychologist, but I deal with adults. I wouldn't be called in to do an evaluation like this. That is an extremely complex assessment. So yes, you could be asked, is this person insane at the time of the offense? But you also have to look at developmental factors that were at play. What other things that were going on inside the childhood, right? That's something if someone was already 20 years old, you really wouldn't be factoring in. But because there were other home issues, school issues, right? The person has to be developmentally aware of some things, and that requires a specific kind of psychologist, forensic psychologist, to do.
And you mentioned just the uniqueness, the kind of niche factor of this, because as we talk about it now, it's called the Slender Man stabbings, talking about a shadowy fictional character, an internet boogeyman. When we're talking about the internet, a lot has changed in more than a decade since 2014 in terms of that. But how much of a factor is that? What do they look at? What do people like you look at when the internet, how has shaped this person?
How much time do they spend on the internet? Nowadays, we need to be concerned with AI chatbots and things like that. Before it was message boards. People who are susceptible and vulnerable to negative and very kind of feelings in which the world is an unsafe place, if they find themselves falling into these rabbit holes, and they can easily find themselves in a position where they can't get out. And so the assessment really takes a look at how much time are you spending on these things? How much time are you thinking about these things? How much anxiety is being provoked because you're thinking about these things? And do you have any ways to find your way out of it?
All right, and let's bring it back full circle, because they're still searching for this now 23-year-old Morgan Geyser in central Wisconsin for this. If they get her back in custody, how do those conversations change? What could her life look now?
Listen, a lot of judges are going to say, you cut this ankle monitor off. I understand that you have all these mental health issues, but you probably got to go to prison for this, right? There are a lot of times that some people, that you can't do these things. You're being constantly told by your community supervisor, don't do these things. Stay on your meds, stay in the house, do your job, stay clean. And if you're not, the judge is going to throw the book at you. And so I wouldn't be surprised if the judge decides that, this person clearly needs more supervision.
And I want to ask you, because you talk about this search, and this is unique in this fashion for just the severity of the crime that she committed, but also the mental state that she is in. Do they have people like you, a forensic psychologist, someone that's looking at kind of the mental state, searching for this alongside law enforcement? Are they a resource available to police?
Law enforcement often have police psychologists that they could use. Maybe they're being involved. But listen, if she is as disorganized as she could potentially be, then this shouldn't be too hard, right? It's not like she came up with some kind of elaborate scheme. She's not really a criminal mastermind or anything like that. My hope is that they find her quickly, because my concern is that they might not find her. And if they do find her, they may not find her alive.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Very well as well. Dr. John Delatorre, anything else you'd like to add about this case? Because it's obviously really resurfacing back into the national narrative. Anything else you want to note?
These issues are very complex, and I understand it's super easy to kind of say, well, she deserved to be wherever it is that she deserved to be, but she also deserved help. And she probably needed help from a lot earlier age. I think things like these can be prevented, but we certainly got to get back to talking to our kids about what's going on, what they're doing on their phones. Talking to one another is one of the key things that I think we need to do.
Yeah, scary sign out there. We'll see. Obviously, they're telling people to call 911 if you are aware or are familiar potentially with the whereabouts of Morgan Geyser. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, your insight. You're on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, thanks so much. All right, great conversation as always, as authorities in Wisconsin searching for now the 23-year-old in connection with that crime back in 2014 in the Slender Man stabbings. And I do want to give you a little bit more context, what we're talking about here from what is going on as they are searching for Morgan Geyser, as she and Anissa Weier at 12 years old in 2014 when they stabbed and nearly killed their classmate, reportedly to please the fictional horror character Slender Man. Both girls pleaded guilty in the case. Both said they were not responsible because they were mentally ill.